All right, so we're joined out from John's out in rural Rankin County by my friend Ashley Welch, former Velma Jackson teacher, who's now the owner of the Punky Rooster in Brandon, or I'm sorry, Pearl. We thank you so much for joining us. This is our entrepreneurship class here at Velma Jackson. We're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you for fitting us in your schedule today.
Of course.
Now, obviously, we want to talk about all the things you do at the Punky Rooster because it's really cool, and I enjoyed seeing the website. It's kind of a fun atmosphere. But just give us a little background because obviously you taught senior English here for a couple of years at Velma Jackson. Just give us a little background on your education, and kind of how you pivoted from being a teacher to now being an entrepreneur.
Well, I graduated from Belhaven in 2003, so my very first teaching job was at Velma. I taught under Miss Ashmore when Miss Ashmore was there from 2003 to 2005. Yeah, so 2 years, and I loved it there. I would have still stayed and taught there, but it was just so far for me at the time. So I ended up resigning, and I came home. Just did some stuff at the house, and then I went back and I taught another year in Pearl. But then after that, I had kids. I was a stay-at-home mom for a while, and so the business kind of came from just being at home and trying to figure out a way to still stay home with them. So I,
Absolutely, which is yeah, and that's a huge pro of entrepreneurship, which we have talked about because it does allow you to set your own schedule. It allows you to be involved with your children if you want to have a family, but it just comes with a lot of time management. So, obviously, the Punky Rooster is your business there in Pearl. So, give us where the idea came from, because people can say clothing stores are a dime a dozen, but obviously, you are doing things a little bit differently.
yeah, well, when I first started, I started in 2013, and at that time, I've had to do a lot of pivoting because everything's changed so much over the years. But in
Absolutely.
2013, I was at home with the kids, and I was just trying to find a way to make a little extra money just to help my husband out and kind of help out while I stayed home with them. So I started by sewing. I taught myself to sew, and I would sell on Etsy. I would make all my own like little bow ties and clothes. I'd make little kids' clothes,
Wow.
and I would sell it on Etsy for a few years. And then whenever Etsy used to be only handmade, and then whenever they
Mhm.
started allowing other people to come in that were just like buying stuff and reselling, my sales went down. So I had to come up with something new. So that's whenever I started more of the boutique clothing. And I started the online boutique stuff in 2015 when there wasn't a whole lot of, there weren't, everybody and their mama wasn't starting a boutique. So I was one of the only people that had an online platform, an online boutique, and it took off. And so I was online for 6 years doing that. And then I opened the store in Pearl, and we had the store in Pearl for 6 years up until December of this year. I had some health issues and I needed to come on back home. So it worked out though, because now in the last like year and a half, everything's kind of switched to online. Most people are wanting to go to work, come home, not have to deal with anything. So our sales were starting to be about 70% were online versus 30% in the store anyway. So
Wow.
yeah, that's how ours was. So it worked out perfectly because even though I'm down 30% of the ones who would come to the store, the 70% now is online, and I'm not having to pay all the overhead. So it works out great.
Yeah, and we've had other owners of clothing stores on this platform, and it's such a science because I've had people say, I started out online, I opened the storefront, and I can't imagine not doing it without the storefront. But
Yeah.
then you hear what you say, and it makes perfect sense because you said only 30% of my sales was face to face. And even though I lose the sales, I don't have the cost because I think that is something that is lost all the time because you hear kids say, I want to have a shop, I want to do this, but they don't think about all the fixed costs that go into having a storefront. So obviously you said you lost that 30% of sales. What were some of the overhead or the fixed costs that you had having a storefront?
Well, I was fortunate to have lower overhead than most people because of my location. It wasn't the busiest location, but it was really helpful for me to sleep at night, not being in debt. But other than the rent, utilities, you had store insurance in case someone came in and failed, the employees, and then I would have to, we're responsible. The employees are responsible for half of their taxes and stuff that are taken out. So we had all the taxes I would have to pay. I mean, there were just accountants, all the stuff that you would think a business would need. So I guess I probably got rid of more than 30% if I really think about it. When I really
Wow.
added up, it even though it's like on paper, I'm bringing in less, it actually averages out or even more by being online. I did
Wow.
believe at the time that I decided to open the storefront, it gave a legitimacy to my business because by this point, there were a lot of people trying to do online. And because I had been online for so long, I was able to open a successful storefront. I think it would be very hard to just go and open a storefront without having an online presence today. It would be almost impossible, I think. You would have to really know a lot of people to make that a success.
I agree. Now, along the same lines, we wonder, how did you build your customer base? Because obviously you have to provide a great product and you got to have great customer service, but at some point you've got to reach your target market. So as an entrepreneur, especially if you're building an online presence, how can you reach the market that you're trying to sell to?
Well, when I originally started, I was doing children's clothing only, and I had young children, so they were in school, and I had, I was in Madison County for a while, and then I went to Brandon in the city, and then I moved out to the Puckett area. So I kind of knew different moms from different areas. We were all on Facebook. So whenever I decided to start it, I started as like a Facebook group, and I
Wow.
put it on my personal page and just invited everyone to join and told them I had, stuff, and then I would use some of the local kids to model it. And a lot of people just joined. There weren't a lot of options for clothing. There weren't a lot of online stores. It wasn't anything like it is now. So it
Yeah.
was easier to build. It would be harder to build today. I was very fortunate to get in the beginning stages of online shopping.
Now, obviously, you said you started out just doing children's clothes, and I know you still do the children's clothes. But
Yeah.
talk about some of the products you have because you have something now for everybody. So, what made you move into? I know you started with the children's clothes. What made you move to focusing on other areas as well? Because sales is such a science as well. Because you hear people say, "Well, my love is this, but if I can sell this too, I can sell more of this." So, talk about how you transitioned to not being just kids and have adults and accessories. You got the hats, you got all kind of stuff. So, just talk about that because I think it's very interesting.
Well, the reason I ended up originally adding like women's clothing was just because after a couple of years, it did seem like they were they used to get used to parents would only spend money on their kids. And then I started noticing a shift to where all the parents were wanting to buy for themselves and the kids were just wearing like Garanimals from Walmart. So I was like, okay, well, we got to think about this. So I did start bringing in some women's clothing, and I noticed that the women's clothing was more successful. I made more money at it. I sold more. So I started focusing on the women's, and even at the storefront, whenever I had that, when I first opened, a few things I had to do. One side, like the left side when you walked in, was all children's, and the right side was all women's. And over time at the store, I started realizing that my sales for women's clothing were like 40% more than my clothing for children's. So I switched children's to just a small, like quarter section of the store, and the rest of it was the adult stuff and the gifts because there are so many different holidays and special events that people buy little gifty items, purses,
Yep.
hats, bags, stuff. So I would keep that in stock. And even today, like whenever I post things for special, like Easter, I'll post like little $2, $3, $4 items. They'll add up fast, and people will buy that just so they don't have to go to the store and deal with people, and they'll just buy it online and then pick it up.
Yeah, and the thing is, we always say, and I've had hundreds of entrepreneurs on this channel, and I always say, people will pay for convenience. So if you can add something else, and even if it's just a few dollars more, that adds up. So let's say, you have the $3 add-on. If 100 people do that, that's 300 more bucks, and you really don't have a high, especially if it's not a high cost item. So doing small things can make you stand out. Um, Now, one thing I also want to talk about was the pricing because I think that is also something that a lot of young entrepreneurs struggle with. Because we've had several kids come through Velma Jackson, come through this class, started their own business, great concept, great customer service, even cool logos they design themselves. They start posting their prices, and I immediately say, "You're not charging enough." Because it's so hard to get out of that teenage mindset of I need to sell something that I could afford, that my friends could afford, and obviously clothing is a competitive market, especially here in the metro area now. Like you said, there's been more and more competition open. So how do you decide how to price your products while still staying competitive and still staying profitable?
Well, I will say, I have people who complain to me about other businesses and their prices, and I have to always tell them, like, no, it's like, it's a difference between having an online boutique and having a storefront, first of all, because rent alone is so expensive. I mean, even like it doesn't matter where you go, rent's crazy. And a lot of times they have to do a higher markup. And it's not that they're trying to bleed you dry or trying to, get one over on you. They have to have a higher price in order to even survive. And, but what I try to do is I usually you have at least a 50% markup, like I at least double, and then I'll add in my shipping and all. I try not to make it too high because I am a very frugal shopper as well, and I don't want to overcharge. I know what I would be willing to spend, so I think some of the students may be like me, where they try not to make it be too expensive, but you have to at least make sure it's worth your time. You have to get your money back. It's a business. You're trying to make money and pay your bills, so you at least need to have double it, have a markup of at least half, like double it.
Yeah, and then you can offer things that So, and I always use this example. I referee basketball and things, and I'll be on a referee site buying new equipment, and I'll be like $5 away from free shipping. And I'm like,
Oh
oh
yeah,
well, let me get something else.
I do that too.
So even if it's just $8, I might take my total to say $100, get free shipping, and I might take my total to 103. Well, yeah, I'm not paying for shipping, but they've already made what they wanted to make off of me just because I bought one more item. You like what I'm not a clothing expert by any stretch, but buying a $10 pair of earrings that probably cost you $2, $3, and they get something out of it. It's all about perceived value.
Yes. Yeah. And you also have to, something you mentioned earlier, about kind of like knowing your customer. Over the years, I've tried to like cater to everybody. It's like, okay, well, let me get stuff for the young teenagers. Well, I don't have a young teenage eye anymore, so I can go and pick something out. But
There you go.
I finally just decided to stick with what I knew. And most of my customers are 30 plus, 30 years old and up. And I know that demographic very well. And every once in a while, I'll post something kind of younger on there, and they'll buy it for their teenage daughters, or some of the 20s will come on. But I don't know that market well enough I can't make everyone happy. So I've kind of just staying with my demographic, and it's paid off for me.
Awesome. Well, I do have some questions from the students, and unfortunately, I only have young men in here with me today. But we'll have some ladies see this later. But I always say this, and I think you'd agree. Even we've had a lot of females that deal with female dominated markets, but a lot of the concepts are the same. Just because you're selling something toward females doesn't mean that a young man can't start a business geared toward males and have the same mindset. So just because it's a product that and your market knows, that doesn't mean that males can't get something out of what you're saying. So I always say that, like I've had the girls selling the hair and everything, and I'm like, look, just because guys don't really sell this particular product doesn't mean that the concepts don't still apply.
Well, men's clothing is very popular, and there are very few places that sell men's items. So, hey, they may need to start a men's boutique.
Yeah, and actually, we have another friend of this class in Texas, and she's a female that sells men's clothes.
Oh, so it's
She
very,
makes custom suits for men, and makes an absolute killing.
that's amazing.
But I love this first question.
Gosh, I hope I can answer it.
I think you can. This is Shirai Luckett. He's in 10th grade, and he asked, if you ever stopped your business and wanted to teach again, would you ever come back to Velma Jackson?
I think Velma Jackson is the only place I would come back to. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
I let my license lapse, I didn't get my license renewed, so I'd have to go through all this process. But I enjoyed my time at Velma very much, very much.
Yeah, and I think most people would agree about that. And people think, and I know you're such a huge proponent of the Camden area and Velma Jackson. I tell people all the time, people that leave Velma Jackson don't leave because they think it sucks. They leave because of,
I
they
love
have family, they move away, or, just convenience issues. Because obviously, if you have small kids, it is very difficult to get out here. So I think that sentiment is echoed by majority of the former staff here. And it's great to hear you say that. And I know you've been always very positive about the Velma Jackson community. I like this one. This is Robert Branson. He's a senior, one of our football players. And he asked, what made you choose this particular business when you were sitting at home coming up with a way to start your own business?
Well, I say it's a God thing, because really I had never sewn. Like, I started by sewing. I had never sewn or anything. I was just kind of like, God, help me find something that I can bring a little extra money, and I need something. And out of nowhere one day, I got this idea to make a bow, like to make this cool little headband bow thing. And I went and got a hot glue gun and some fabric and started cutting and I just made it. I posted it. I sold my first one that same day. As soon as I posted,
Wow.
so I put about $200 in to start the business. I went to Hobby Lobby, got some fabrics and different things and started it. But this is my third business. I've always had entrepreneurial mindset. So this is the third one. I sold my very first one. And then the second one, I closed in 2008 during the recession. And when I had my first baby, I decided it was too much, came home with my little one. So that's how I started this one, though. Well, I decided to. It just kind of came to me. And then as far as bringing the clothing in, that just kind of came from, like I said, pivoting. You had to kind of keep up with what was happening around you in order to stay, in business.
Absolutely. Well, I got one more. This is Terry Thompson. He's also a senior, one of our football players. And he asked, what's the biggest obstacle you've had to face while being in business?
Well, COVID was a big one. We had to shut down for a while, but luckily for me, we did really well online. Well, in the last probably year and a half, it's been Shein and Temu, like, the just cheaper options for online. That is another reason why now the stuff I post, I'm real careful about what I buy to resell because, back when I began, you got a nice pair of jeans and somebody would pay, $70 for them. But now it's like they don't want to. It's like, okay, they're on sale for 20 today. Let's get them at 20. So people have gotten very comfortable with their cheap buying. So yeah, definitely the Shein and Temu. I think that's what a lot of the boutique owners I know complain about.
Yeah, and but one thing that I know you can do, obviously the Shein and Temu are taking a big chunk out of the market, but you hear about their complaints about quality. So
Yeah.
again, just me, and again, I don't have a whole lot of money to spend on fancy clothes, but I also know I'm not going to buy something cheap that's going to tear up. So you can sell the fact that I have quality material. This is not going to tear up. This is going to have a long life because, for me personally, I'd rather buy something that's going to last me a long time than buy something cheap that I was going to get torn up if you put it in the washing machine one time.
And that's actually another good reason for having a clientele of 30 and up because they're more that mindset. Like I would pay an extra $5, $10 to have something I can wear for a while versus, a 16-year-old who's like, I just want that shirt for a night. So yeah, the older clientele helps out with that.
Absolutely, I agree 100%. Now we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much
Yeah, I
for
enjoyed
joining
it.
us and for pivoting on the time and everything. And Miss Taylor, your great friend here, just was so
Oh,
happy that you were speaking. Just had so many great things to say about you.
Taylor.
And our cafeteria manager, Miss Jones, is finally retiring, who also had a lot of great things to say about you as well. And we just thank for your, even though you've been gone a while, we thank you for your continued support of Velma Jackson and all the great things you say about us. But before we go, just a couple of things. First of all, even though I've got all guys in here with me today, we'll have some females see this later, and they may need something to buy for their women. So where can we buy your clothes online?
Well, the best thing to do is to join my private group on Facebook. That's the main place I post. It's called the Punky Rooster. It's a group. You ask to join, and I put you through. And right now, I'm still because I'm getting my website back up right now. So Facebook, I'd go to the group. I always post things. I've got a lot of things on sale right now because I just had a market, and so I have leftovers from markets. I've been doing them at clearance.
Absolutely, and it's like I said, you have to look at you hear all the time about how men don't go in women's stores. Well, if men are buying something for their lady, they need to be able to to see something too. So I really encourage if we got Mother's Day coming up, we got a lot of graduation and things coming up, so you could have something great that they could find and get a great product. So really encourage everybody to do that. But the last thing before we go, you said you've always had that entrepreneurial mindset even when
Yes.
you were teaching, you've always had that mindset. So even if these kids don't want to be a full-time entrepreneur, but they still want to have that entrepreneurial mindset, they want to have the side hustle. Why is that entrepreneurial mindset so important as these kids get ready to transition out of high school into their next step?
Yeah, I mean, at first you may not be able to just jump on board with just all into the business. It's a great way to, have a good job bringing in money, and you can actually put a little bit aside to put into your business. When I taught at Velma Jackson, I was on my second business, which was a wholesale lotion and candle business. And I would come up there and I would sell stuff to the teachers, and I would have it at my desk, and the students would come by and play in it and want to buy them and stuff. the little lotions and all. So, I mean, I think a lot of them probably have that entrepreneurial spirit on them. And if they have something in mind that they're good at, focus on it. Of course, go to school, get you a job and all, but definitely put it towards it and just try it. It may take a little while to get started, but if you have it in you, it's worth it to try it.
Well, again, we thank you so much for joining us. This only the second former Velma Jackson teacher we've ever had. I'm
Oh,
sorry, we had one current one. She was on our off block and came and talked about her business. But that was a while ago. But the first ever former Velma Jackson teacher we've had. We've had several alums, but never a former teacher. But we thank you so much for joining us. The owner of the Funky Rooster. Join the Facebook group
Punky
Funky Rooster.
Rooster.
What was that?
Punky Rooster.
Yeah, the Funky Rooster, and the website funkyrooster.com being worked on, but so many great things. And we thank you so much for joining us all the way out from Johns near Puckett, Mississippi. Ashley Welch, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg.
All right, talk to you soon, buddy.
All right, bye bye.